Chandler ended up riding a 12 point per game on an expected 11 point per game mini breakout at the end of the year. Look, Aaron Jones' contract is like his hairline. It's damn near non-existent. This is a guy that you're asking him now to stay healthy for an entire season, something that he has struggled to do. No, I don't believe it.
What?
Why are you shaking your head?
You're welcome.
I'm Thomas Tipple. That's Ryan Heath. And these are 4 players that you need to be purchasing for your Dynasty teams right now. It is early in the offseason. Identifying potential sleepers at this stage of the game that aren't rookies, because that's easy. Nah, we are here doing the hard work, the hard yakka for every single one of you guys. This is 4 players that we think you should be buying right now. Ryan, you're going to kick us off with the player that in our last video we hinted at a lot. So let's kick it off. First player that we're buying right now.
Yeah, I have a wide receiver under 30 years old that I believe has legitimate fantasy wide receiver 1 upside for the next couple of seasons. And you can get him as the wide receiver 35 by Dynasty ADP. So I'm talking about Amari Cooper, of course. Cooper is a bit of an enigma. Just looking at his season last year, top 12 by yards per out run. It's pretty good. Wide receiver 17 by fantasy points per game. Not as great. Why was that the case? Let's look at his catchable target rate. Under 70% of Amari Cooper's targets were deemed catchable by fantasy points data. That was 10th worst among 81 qualifying wide receivers. So Cooper dealt with a lot of really bad quarterback play. Our first instinct might be, okay, that's Deshaun Watson's fault. Let's blame it on Deshaun Watson. I understand the impulse to do that, but that isn't the case. With Deshaun Watson, Amari Cooper's catchable target rate was 76%, and his yards per route run was almost 3 yards per route run from Amari Cooper in games with Deshaun Watson. That was top 5. With Joe Flacco, his yards per route run was top 2. It was really these 6 games in the middle of the season with PJ Walker, Jeff Driscoll, Dorian Thompson-Robinson that completely imploded Amari Cooper's season-long counting stats. But he performed like an elite wide receiver 1 anytime he had anything approaching competent quarterback play. Deshaun Watson should be healthy to start the season. Kind of weird vibes, weird reports on that right now. But look, it's May. I'm not going to actually factor that into my evaluation of Amari Cooper. So as I said up at the top, a guy who is under 30 years old, has the potential for multiple wide receiver 1 seasons. I want that in Dynasty. I will happily send away any rookie pick after the 202 for him. I would love to trade like a Joe Mixon, a DeAndre Swift, David Montgomery tier of running back for him. I think it's unbelievable the prices that you can get Amari Cooper for right now. He makes sense as a buy on contenders. He even makes sense as a buy on non-contenders that are just looking for a safe store of value that isn't a running back. Hey, I get that struggle. I think just moving your scary running back for Amari Cooper and not having to worry about it for a year or two is a good move, even if you're not contending.
Amari Cooper feels safe. He feels like one of those players that we've been talking about. Seems like he has been in the league for 15, 20 years already, but realistically, all he ever does is just produce wide receiver 1 to borderline wide receiver numbers, sans a season or 2, maybe some injuries. We saw a guy put up league-winning numbers toward the end of the year, and in between, like you mentioned, he had a bunch of XFL players that our own Jake Tribby wouldn't even put in a DFS lineup. That says a lot. Well, maybe Jeff Driscoll. He does run quite a bit, and Jake's a sicko. However, Amari Cooper was great out of the gate, and again, a league winner. And you're getting this player, like Ryan said, at an absolutely disgusting discount. He is a must-add. Imagine you roll into the season, and Amari Cooper is the 4th wide receiver in your start 10 Dynasty team. Oh My goodness, that is truly disgusting, and it shouldn't be possible, but it is. So go and start poking around now before your friends start seeing this video and letting you know that he is emphatically not for sale.
Only thing I want to add is that Jake Tribby would never dream of dabbling in Jeff Driscoll when the alternative is Joe Flacco. Jake Tribby is an enlightened Joe Flacco enjoyer. So just wanted to clear that up. Go buy Amari Cooper.
Amazing. I love Jake. He'll appreciate that.
He will.
When you play Superflex Dynasty, all you ever hear people talk about is how valuable the quarterback position is. But I'm about to call every one of you that play this format liars. Because what we are doing is allowing a quarterback to slip all the way to QB 31 as of the May ADP on Dynasty Data Lab. A quarterback that averaged 16 points per game in his last healthy season and just got one of the top wide receivers in the draft. And his only quarterback competition is Drew Lock, more known for his lip syncing on the sidelines than his quarterback play. I have faith that Daniel Jones is exactly the type of buy that we need this time of the year. You have an opportunity to net a quarterback 3 or 4 on your team at a fraction of the price that they usually cost you. This time last year, Hendon Hooker was the QB 33 coming off the board, and we have disrespected Daniel Jones much too much. I understand that last year, round 4 Daniel Jones, it gave you the ick just a little bit, but it's not last year. It's 2024. I understand he's coming off the knee injury, but churning out these late round buys from quarterbacks has been successful for years. We had Jordan Love, Brock Purdy, Baker Mayfield, all examples of quarterbacks that went after the 12th and 13th round in Superflex startups that you were able to profit from. Now, I am not saying that Daniel Jones is a messiah. He will not fix your team. But last year, they had an obscene amount of quarterbacks go down. Over 60 quarterbacks started games in the NFL last year. And you are telling me that we are getting a rushing upside, granted he's coming off an knee injury, with an elite rookie added, an athletic tight end, a porous running game behind him, and let's be frank, a defense that has a lot of work to do. All of that spells out a ton of opportunity, and he is almost free. As of right now, you are able to go out and realistically offer up the 2024 206 and a third round pick to go and secure a quarterback of this nature, and even that might be deemed as an overpay. This will correct itself. The moment Daniel Jones steps on the field, his value is going to skyrocket to a point where it is not worth putting that risk on the investment. But if you are asking me if I would rather go and spend the iron price on another quarterback that turned things around like a Baker Mayfield going QB 22, or taking a shot at Justin Fields at QB 25, that maybe he can beat out Russell Wilson? No. Give me Daniel Jones and his rushing upside for the New York Giants at QB 31, and I'm going to give you a bonus. Go and buy Russell Wilson, who's QB 33. What are we doing? There should not be that big of a gap from Justin Fields to Russell Wilson. Go buy Daniel Jones, go buy Russell Wilson, and stop paying excessive markup prices. I feel like I'm a car dealer right now. Stop paying markup prices for discount quarterbacks and take the fantasy points course of action and buy cheap, productive QB 3s and 4s and save your fantasy football mental health.
Yeah, I'm going to mostly agree here. The strategy for filling your QB3 or your QB4 spot in Dynasty is you look at the list of quarterbacks and you say, okay, who's the cheapest guy on here that is live to start 1 year from now? So to start at the beginning of 2025. That's Daniel Jones, unfortunately. You could argue it's Russell Wilson. It's definitely not Sam Darnold. It's definitely not Gardner Minshew. It's definitely not some of these guys that yes, while they could see some spot starts this year, there is not really upside for them to hold value. In your QB3 spot, you may as well have it double between an emergency quarterback option, and this is an opportunity for my roster to gain value. And that's whether you're a contender or not a contender. You want that no matter what. So, yep, I'll co-sign. I did have the ick with Daniel Jones last year. Absolutely. I'll be the first to admit, but you got to get over it at some point in Dynasty. The Dynasty fantasy football vibes will create so many discounts like this.
Mm-hmm.
The vibes are awful on Daniel Jones right now, and they're bad enough that the ADP is where I'm okay with buying in.
You can not like Daniel Jones, even after everything we laid out. You can go, nope, Tom, Ryan, fantasy points, you're morons. I'm never going to do that. Then at least go and buy Drew Lock. Quarterback 44. At least buy Drew Lock. We're taking Kenny Pickett and Jameis Winston still. Those dreams are dead. What we do have is a situation where if you really think Daniel Jones is cooked and you really believe the reports that Scott Barrett laid out in his post-draft interview content, then you should be buying Drew Lock based on what the New York Giants said about how they felt he was the best quarterback in this draft, or would have been the best quarterback in this draft after the first two QBs went off the board. If you believe that, which I don't, I think that's just coach speak for hyping your guy up and not drafting a quarterback. But if you hate Daniel Jones that much, you should at least invest in the free Drew Lock so he can lip sync for your fantasy rosters on the bench. Next up is a player that I have been against drafting for years because I thought he was being overdrafted. However, the market is smarter now than it has ever been with so many tools and as much content as there is out there. But Ryan, you seem to have the next big buy at wide receiver, and I actually am inclined to agree with you.
Yeah, it's Jaylen Waddle. So I've been with you, Tom, for a while that I've just viewed Waddle as a pricey option, kind of lacking true like top half of the wide receiver one rankings upside. But I don't think that's the case anymore, especially now that we're getting a discount. So last year, Jaylen Waddle only ran a 70% route share in 6 games. In those games, he averaged 17 and a half fantasy points per game. That would rank 7th best, and 83 receiving yards per game. That would have been top 10. Looking at yards per route run, he was top 12. He had an unbelievable season on a per route basis last year. Now, it didn't feel like he had an unbelievable season because he randomly kept getting knocked out of games early. It's kind of unbelievable. I went through all of the injury reports and all of the blurbs on Jaylen Waddle left this game early, and I believe I got them all together. But weeks 1 through 2, he was limited in practice with an oblique injury that he picked up in the preseason, got knocked out of week 2 early with a concussion, didn't play week 3. In weeks 4 and 5, he was under a 66% route share. My guess with that is that the Dolphins were being incredibly cautious with concussions, especially after the Tua experience from the year prior. That's just kind of my speculation. Finally, in week 7, he's back to a full-time route share. Oh, and immediately leaves the game with a back injury, does return, but misses a bunch of plays. Week 8, he's limited in practice all week, but has no injury designation. So nobody looking back at just the designations would say, oh, he was hurt during this week 8 game, but he most likely was. Week 9, left the game early, returned, had a knee injury. Week 16, left the game early with a high ankle sprain. All of these games, he left early, and that hurts all of his per game numbers. But yes, when you look at the per route numbers, Jaylen Waddle was a fantasy wide receiver 1 last year. And he was just overall the year before. We've seen Jaylen Waddle finish as a fantasy wide receiver 1. And right now, he's just the wide receiver 11 in Dynasty. he is going after guys like Chris Olave, Drake London, both of whom I think are talented players, but we haven't seen either of those guys be this efficient or put up anywhere near the career production that we know Jaylen Waddle is capable of. So I kind of have Waddle as an incredible value after that tier of elite wide receivers. So I'm happy to trade any like Brandon Ayuk, Michael Pittman type, even an Olave or a London for Waddle, especially if I'm getting a plus. I'm just kind of calling my shot in that tier here that Waddle is the guy who doesn't belong, who we could be talking about as a top 8, top 7 dynasty wide receiver 1 year from now.
He's young enough that he still has length to his career, and we've seen the upside before. He single-handedly crushed the Ravens at a half of football. Let me tell you, I have cried about that game for years. But knowing that he has that upside, very few players have that. You and I often disagree on if it's better for safety or upside. If you have Jaylen Waddle as your second or third wide receiver on your team, I do not think you care about consistency with him. You know what he can do, even with a limited quarterback like Tua. Yes, I said limited. You can at me in the comments if you want to. And while you are at it, let us know what players you are buying and for what. We joke a lot about running backs and how you just don't want to buy them at any time ever. However, every once in a while, we get gifted a running back that is so cheap that we cannot help ourselves in May. And for me, that running back is Ty Chandler. I think he has an opportunity to Zamir White himself into relevancy this season. RB61 on Fantasy Calc, RB65 on Keep Trade Cut, and RB61 in ADP right now on Dynasty Data Lab on the day that we are recording this. This time last year, people were still drafting a retired Tom Brady. And this year, we are allowing 4 weeks of double-digit fantasy points production and one week 15 standout week-winning performance to hang so low in our drafts. We think so little of Ty Chandler that in some leagues, he's still on the waiver wire, and that is unacceptable to me. I understand that Aaron Jones is still believed to be Timothy Jones, but you're telling me that I can stash RB2 to flex production at the end of my bench for virtually nothing? I mean, if you were to remove his 4 carry and 1 reception game he had in week 12 versus Chicago, Chandler ended up riding a 12 point per game on an expected 11 point per game mini breakout at the end of the year. Look, Aaron Jones' contract is like his hairline. It's damn near non-existent. This is a guy that you're asking him now to stay healthy for an entire season, something that he has struggled to do. No, I don't believe it. What that means is there's a real opportunity. Their head coach, Ryan, you mentioned it on the podcast, Dynasty Points. He already sat there at the combine talking about how much he liked Ty Chandler and what he did at the end of that year. Aaron Jones has done a lot of great things for the fantasy community, but changing teams, hitting that 30-year wall on a 1-year contract with his history of staying healthy, I'm just not betting on that. Don't get me wrong. I like Aaron Jones for fantasy in 2024. But what I really like are super cheap, very affordable running backs who, in an offensive system like KOC runs in Minnesota, has the opportunity to put up anywhere from 12 to 20 points. I want that on my team. Keep in mind that once he started to take over, there was only 1 game where he did not have multiple receptions. We are not just talking about a one-dimensional LDD back in this offense. And with a rookie quarterback, keeping the ball on the ground might be a more important option for Minnesota than fantasy players want to imagine as reality. Ty Chandler, you, sir, are my 2024 Zamir White. Come on down.
I love this take. Yeah, I am normally not interested in paying up for handcuffs, really in any format of fantasy football. But especially in Dynasty, I think we very often overvalue this archetype of asset because, look, the likelihood that any particular second string running back is going to walk into a giant workload is not that high on an individual player level. But I'm a little confused with Ty Chandler here because, unlike a lot of depth charts in May right now, we can just look at the Vikings depth chart and say Ty Chandler is very clearly the RB2 here. There is not serious competition. You only have to look one spot below Ty Chandler on the running back depth chart, and you get to a guy whose name I can't pronounce. I don't know how you say Kenny Nwangwu. I don't know if that was correct or if I just butchered that at all. I think he mostly plays special teams. Miles Gaskin is on this roster. He
Oh
was
my God.
the emergency midweek signing, I believe, last year. That's what we're dealing with here. Dwayne McBride is extremely, extremely dead. So I'm into Ty Chandler. I agree that Aaron Jones's projection, as especially as a workhorse, is very shaky this year. His projection to stay on the field is shaky as always. In this offensive system, I am happy to pay fairly bargain bin prices for a Ty Chandler who, as you've said, we have seen handle a big workload, at least in a couple games here and there, and who, unlike most other teams, we are very, very clear on who the handcuff actually is.
I think one thing that's not looked at enough is knowing what you can get. We know what we can have in this system, and that is just not a lot of things that we know about backup running backs. We know now what Alexander Madison might have done in that role. We were projecting him. Oh, Cook is gone. Madison is him. Turns out what you got wasn't what we thought. However, we know what Ty Chandler can do in this offense, and that is win you playoff weeks. I want that stashed on my bench. Maybe, yes, we need an injury to Aaron Jones to happen. Okay. I'm not going to sit here and root for somebody to get injured. However, I will be prepared for it and I will be ready to profit off of that. So there you go. 4 players that Ryan and I think that you should be buying in fantasy right now. Enjoy, click like, hit subscribe, leave a comment, let us know if we're right or wrong, and we'll see you guys the next time we try to help you win your leagues in May.